Nathan Carter had spent years in courtrooms, deciding cases that shaped lives. As a respected judge, he was used to dealing with ridiculous lawsuits and petty disputes. But his biggest legal battle? That would come from a trampoline in his own backyard. The trampoline that started it all. Nathan wasn't just a judge, he was also a father. When his 2 kids begged him for a trampoline, he didn't think twice. Heavy checkmark, he bought the sturdiest, safest model. Heavy checkmark, installed it in his fenced backyard. Heavy checkmark, made sure it met every possible safety code. For weeks, his kids jumped and laughed, filling their home with joy. But then, Karen happened. Enter Karen, the HOA tyrant. Karen Whitmore, the self-appointed queen of the HOA, had a problem with fun. Heavy checkmark, she hated anything that wasn't aesthetically pleasing. Heavy checkmark, she patrolled the neighborhood with a clipboard like it was a military base. Heavy checkmark, and she loved handing out petty fines. Nathan had avoided her nonsense for years. Until the day she spotted the trampoline. The first confrontation. Nathan was in his home office, finishing up a case file, when he heard a sharp knock on his door. He opened it, and there was Karen, clipboard in one hand, HOA violation notice in the other. Nathan sighed. Let me guess. You have an issue with my backyard. Karen smirked. Judge Carter, I'm here regarding your unauthorized recreational equipment. Nathan raised an eyebrow. You mean the trampoline? Karen nodded. According to HOA guidelines, trampolines are considered unsightly hazards and are strictly prohibited. Nathan crossed his arms. Karen, my trampoline is not visible from the street. It's in my private backyard. Karen grinned, handing him a bright red violation slip. Rules are rules. You have 48 hours to remove it, or you'll be fined $1,500. Nathan laughed. Karen, you just made a very big mistake. Because what Karen didn't know, Nathan wasn't just any judge. He specialized in property law. And now, he was about to teach Karen a legal lesson she'd never forget. HOA's first power move. Karen had officially declared war. But instead of being intimidated, Nathan was amused. Because if she wanted a legal fight, he was more than happy to give her one. Karen tries to make it official. The next morning, Nathan woke up to a letter taped to his front door. Pushbin official HOA violation notice. Unauthorized recreational equipment. $1,500 fine. Failure to maintain aesthetic standards. $750 fine. Disregard for community safety. $500 fine. Nathan chuckled. Disregard for community safety? It was a trampoline, not a nuclear reactor. Then, as if on cue. Morning, Judge Carter. Nathan looked up. Karen stood on the sidewalk, arms crossed, smug as ever. Enjoying your morning reading? She asked sweetly. Nathan folded the letter and stuffed it into his pocket. Karen, I'll make this simple. I'm not paying a dime. Karen smirked. That's what I was hoping you'd say. Then, she pulled out her phone and started dialing. Nathan raised an eyebrow. What are you doing? Karen grinned. Calling the city inspector. Karen calls in backup. An hour later, a city code enforcement officer pulled into Nathan's driveway. The officer, a stocky man in his 50s, stepped out looking bored. Sir, we got a complaint about an illegal structure? Nathan sighed. You mean my trampoline? The officer checked his clipboard. Yeah. Nathan gestured toward the backyard. Go ahead. Inspect away. Karen stood proudly, waiting for the officer to shut Nathan down. Instead, after a few minutes of measuring and taking notes, the officer scratched his head. Sir, this trampoline is 100% compliant with city regulations. Karen's smug look vanished. What? That's impossible, she snapped. The officer shrugged. It's within safety guidelines, it's not visible from the street, and it's secured properly. There's no violation here. Nathan smirked. So, we're done here? The officer nodded. Yep. Have a nice day. Karen's face turned red. But the HOA rules. The officer held up a hand. Ma'am, HOA rules don't override city laws. You can't just make up violations. Karen stammered. This isn't over. Nathan grinned. Oh, Karen, it's only just beginning. Because now, Nathan wasn't just ignoring her. The HOA escalates the conflict. Karen had just suffered a humiliating defeat. Her fines were ignored. Her city complaint was dismissed. But instead of backing down, she doubled down. And this time, she took things too far. Karen issues a fake eviction notice. Nathan was enjoying his morning coffee when he saw a bright red envelope taped to his front door. He ripped it open and read. Pushpin notice of eviction. Due to repeated violations, the HOA is forcing removal from the community. Homeowner has 7 days to vacate the premises. Nathan laughed out loud. She was actually trying to evict him over a trampoline. She really doesn't know who she's messing with. Before he could toss the letter in the trash. Judge Carter. Nathan turned. There she was. Karen stood at the sidewalk, smiling like she had already won. Pack your bags, she said sweetly. Nathan crossed his arms. Karen, an HOA can't evict a homeowner. That's not how property law works. Karen smirked. You'll find out soon enough. Our lawyers are handling it. Nathan tilted his head. Lawyers, huh? Karen nodded. You might as well just sell your house now and save yourself the trouble. Nathan chuckled. You know what, Karen? I think I'll call a lawyer too. Karen's smile faltered. Because what she didn't know. Nathan's lawyer wasn't just any lawyer. He was one of the best real estate litigators in the state. And now, Karen had just triggered a legal war. The HOA board starts to crumble. That evening, Nathan attended the HOA's emergency meeting. Karen, sitting at the head of the table, looked smug as ever. Let's get this over with, she said. Nathan is clearly in violation, and the board must decide his fate. Nathan stood up. Actually, I'd like to go over a few legal issues first. Karen rolled her eyes. You're just stalling. Nathan held up a folder. First of all, he said, this eviction notice is completely illegal. Karen waved a hand. That's your opinion. Nathan grinned. No, Karen. That's the opinion of a judge. He pulled out his phone and played a recording. Speaker high volume audio recording plays speaker high volume. This is attorney Mark Williams. The HOA has zero legal authority to evict a homeowner. Any attempt to do so is fraud and harassment. The board members shifted nervously. Linda, the treasurer, spoke up. Wait, Karen, you said we could legally remove him. Karen hissed. This is just a scare tactic. Nathan raised an eyebrow. A scare tactic? Good to know. Then he slid a document across the table. This is a lawsuit notice for defamation and harassment. I'll be filing it first thing tomorrow. Karen's smile disappeared. One of the board members stood up. I don't want any part of this, he stammered. Another quickly followed. Karen's control was slipping. And Nathan, he was loving every second of it. The HOA oversteps and the protagonist strikes back. Karen was losing control. Her eviction stunt had backfired. Her own board members were turning against her. But instead of accepting defeat, she did something even dumber. Karen calls 911 on the trampoline. Nathan was grilling steaks in his backyard when he heard the sirens. Police car light, 2 police cruisers pulled up in front of his house. Police car light. Nathan sighed. What now? Then from the sidewalk he heard. Officers. Over here. It was Karen, waving her arms like she was reporting a crime in progress. Nathan watched as 2 uniformed officers stepped out. One of them, a grizzled-looking sergeant, approached him. Sir, he said, looking mildly embarrassed, we got a report about an illegal structure on your property. Nathan blinked. You mean my trampoline? Karen jumped in. This man is willfully violating HOA rules and creating a public hazard, she screeched. Nathan rubbed his temples. Let me get this straight, he said. You called 911 over a trampoline? Karen nodded furiously. Yes, and I expect you to take immediate action. The officer exchanged looks with his partner. Then, he turned to Nathan. Sir, do you mind if we inspect the trampoline? Nathan shrugged. Knock yourselves out. Karen's big moment backfires. The officers walked around the trampoline, checking every angle. After a few minutes, the sergeant sighed. Ma'am, he said, turning to Karen, this trampoline is perfectly legal. Karen's jaw dropped. What? The officer continued. It's in compliance with city safety codes, it's on private property, and it's not a public nuisance. Karen's face turned red. But it's an HOA violation. The officer raised an eyebrow. Ma'am, HOA rules don't override actual laws. And calling 911 over a trampoline. He folded his arms. That's filing a false report. Karen's eyes widened. Nathan smirked. Wait, Karen stammered. I was just trying to enforce. The sergeant held up a hand. Ma'am, if you waste emergency resources again, you could be looking at charges. Karen's face went pale. Then the officer turned to Nathan. Sorry about this, Judge Carter, he said, shaking his head. We'll make a note that this was a bogus complaint. Nathan grinned. Appreciate it, officer. And as the police drove away, Karen stormed off, humiliated. Nathan, he just went back to grilling. Because now, he was ready to end this for good. Karen's final, desperate move. Karen had been shut down at every turn. Heavy checkmark, her fake fines failed. Heavy checkmark, her eviction stunt backfired. Heavy checkmark, the police dismissed her 911 call as bogus. But instead of learning her lesson, she went off the deep end. Karen trespasses on Nathan's property. That night, Nathan was watching TV when his security app buzzed. Mobile phone with arrow motion detected backyard. Nathan frowned and checked the feed. And there she was. Karen, dressed in black, creeping into his backyard. With bolt cutters. She was actually trying to destroy the trampoline herself. Nathan grinned. Gotcha. The trap springs shut. Nathan had anticipated this. After Karen's meltdown at the HOA meeting, he suspected she'd try something stupid. So he had installed extra security cameras. Heavy checkmark night vision. White heavy checkmark. Heavy checkmark audio recording. White heavy checkmark. Heavy checkmark autosave footage to the cloud. White heavy checkmark. As Karen snipped one of the safety net poles, Nathan dialed 911. Karen gets caught red-handed. Minutes later, police car light red and blue lights flooded the yard. Police car light. Karen froze like a deer in headlights. 2 officers stepped out, flashlights beaming. Ma'am, step away from the trampoline, one of them ordered. Karen stammered. This is my right as HOA president. Nathan strolled outside, arms crossed. Karen, he said, barely holding back laughter. You're not the HOA president anymore. Karen's eye twitched. I was just enforcing. The officer held up a hand. Ma'am, you're trespassing on private property and damaging personal property. That's criminal mischief. Karen sputtered. This is ridiculous. Nathan pulled out his phone. Would you like to see the security footage? Karen's face drained of color. One officer cuffed her wrists. You're under arrest, ma'am. Karen shrieked. You can't do this. Nathan grinned. Oh, I definitely can. Karen's worst nightmare begins. As Karen was hauled to the squad car, one of the officers turned to Nathan. You want to press formal charges? Nathan nodded. Absolutely. Heavy checkmark trespassing? White heavy checkmark. Heavy checkmark vandalism? White heavy checkmark. Heavy checkmark harassment? White heavy checkmark. Karen screamed from the back of the squad car. This isn't over. Nathan smirked. Oh, Karen, it really is. Because now, Karen wasn't just facing a lawsuit. She was facing jail time. HOA crumbles and Karen's downfall. Karen had finally pushed too far. She wasn't just dealing with petty fines anymore. She was under arrest. And for the first time, she wasn't in control. Karen's arrest shakes the HOA. The next morning, the HOA board members held an emergency meeting. Nathan sat in the front row, watching them sweat. Linda, the treasurer, cleared her throat. It's come to our attention that Karen has been arrested for trespassing and property damage. The board members shifted nervously. One of them muttered, She actually broke into his yard? Over a trampoline? Nathan smirked. Oh, I have video evidence, if anyone wants to see. The board members looked horrified. Linda sighed. We have no choice but to officially remove Karen from the HOA. Nathan raised a hand. Actually, I have a better idea. The board members turned to him. How about we just dissolve the HOA entirely? Gasps rippled through the room. That's extreme, Linda said. Nathan grinned. So was trying to evict a homeowner over a trampoline. The board members whispered among themselves. Then, one by one, heavy checkmark, they voted to dissolve the HOA. Heavy checkmark, all remaining fines were cancelled. Heavy checkmark, Karen was officially expelled. Linda sighed. The HOA is dead. Nathan leaned back, satisfied. Karen had ruined herself. And now, her entire empire was gone. Karen loses everything. The very next day, a moving truck pulled up to Karen's house. Nathan, sipping his coffee, watched from his porch as she frantically packed. Heavy checkmark, she was being sued for damages. Heavy checkmark, she was facing criminal charges. Heavy checkmark, and now? She couldn't even stay in her own neighborhood. As she loaded her last box, Nathan strolled over. Morning, Karen, he said, grinning. She glared at him. This is your fault. Nathan chuckled. No, Karen. This is all you. She clenched her jaw. I'll be back. Nathan smirked. Doubt it. And with that, Karen drove away, a disgraced, powerless nobody. Nathan? He took a deep breath, stretched, and walked back inside. Because for the first time in years, the neighborhood was finally free. The HOA faces full legal consequences. Karen was gone, but Nathan wasn't finished yet. Because the HOA's corruption went deeper than Karen alone. And now? It was time to bring the whole system down. The class action lawsuit. A week after Karen's disastrous downfall, Nathan got a very interesting call from his legal team. "Judge Carter, we have something big." Nathan smirked. "Go on." The former HOA board was illegally pocketing money from fake violations and maintenance fees for years. Nathan leaned back, grinning. "How much?" "Over $200,000 in fraudulent fines and misused funds." Nathan nodded. "File a class action lawsuit. I want every homeowner reimbursed." Within days. Heavy checkmark, dozens of homeowners joined the lawsuit. Heavy checkmark, the city backed the case, confirming HOA corruption. Heavy checkmark, the lawsuit officially went to court. And the result? It was glorious. The court ruling. A month later, Nathan stood in court, watching as the final nail went into the HOA's coffin. The judge, looking over the evidence, shook his head. This court finds that the former Oakwood Estates HOA engaged in fraudulent practices, harassment, and unlawful enforcement. Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. The judge wasn't done. As a result, all wrongfully collected funds will be returned to homeowners, and former board members will be individually fined. The remaining board members looked sick. "Nathan?" He grinned. "Game. Set. Match." Nathan's final power move. After the ruling, one of the former board members, a nervous-looking man named Richard, approached Nathan. "Judge Carter," Richard muttered, "we know you hated Karen, but this lawsuit is ruining us." Nathan took a slow sip of coffee. "Good." Richard swallowed hard. "Is there anything we can do?" Nathan smiled. "There's an office building I just bought downtown. My company needs janitors. Interested?" Richard's face went pale. Nathan smirked. "Let me know if you're interested." Then, he walked away. Because this was justice. Karen's personal downfall. The HOA was dead. The lawsuit was won. The community was free. But what about Karen? Nathan didn't have to wonder for long. Karen's new reality. One afternoon, Nathan was grabbing coffee downtown when he noticed a familiar face behind the counter. Karen, wearing a cheap uniform. Her new job? Barista. Nathan grinned. This was too good. Nathan confronts Karen one last time. He strolled up to the counter, barely containing his laughter. Karen's eyes widened when she saw him. "You," she hissed. Nathan smirked. "Karen, fancy seeing you here. I'll take a large black coffee. No, wait. Make it a triple espresso. I've had a long morning." Karen gritted her teeth and rang up the order. Nathan tapped his card to pay. "Didn't expect to see you here, Karen. But, a job is a job." Karen glared. "I hope you're happy." Nathan sipped his coffee. "Oh, I am. But you know what would make me even happier?" Karen crossed her arms. "What?" Nathan leaned in. "If you put extra whipped cream on my next order. You work for tips now, right?" Karen's face turned red. Nathan grinned. This was poetic justice. The ultimate irony. As Nathan turned to leave, he noticed the store manager walking by. "Hey, Karen," the manager said. "Someone left a mess in the restroom. Can you clean it up?" Nathan chuckled. Karen, who had once tried to run the neighborhood, was now scrubbing toilets. Karma really was a beautiful thing. Epilogue and final mic drop. With Karen gone and the HOA dissolved, Oakwood Estates finally felt like home again. And Nathan, he was finally able to relax. The neighborhood after Karen. Nathan sat on his porch, sipping coffee, watching the community come to life. Heavy checkmark families laughed, kids played freely. Heavy checkmark, no more bogus fines, no more Karen patrols. Heavy checkmark, and the trampoline? Still standing, brighter than ever. For the first time in years, there was peace. Then, his neighbor, Mr. Thompson, strolled up with a grin. "Hey, Judge Carter," he said, handing him a piece of paper. Nathan unfolded it and laughed out loud. Pushpin notice of violation. Infraction. Owning the most legendary trampoline in the HOA's history. Fine. 1,000 high fives from the neighborhood kids. Nathan chuckled. "You really made a fake HOA violation?" Thompson grinned. "Had to keep the tradition alive." Nathan shook his head. "I'll frame it." Then he leaned back, watching as kids bounced on the trampoline, their laughter filling the air. Karen was gone. The HOA was dead. And this was exactly how it should have been all along. With a final, satisfied smirk, Nathan muttered, "Enjoy your new job, Karen."